All right, welcome everyone. Today is going to be a little bit different. I have decided to start the EcoCast, the very creative name, short for my nickname and short for podcast. And my goal is to invite interesting Magic personalities and hopefully have a nuanced dialogue about interesting topics. And today we're going to be talking about a tough one, certainly a conversation that's tough to have on Twitter, I have learned, which is basically trying to unpack the state of Legacy, what should Wizards of the Coast do, and what can we as players do in the meantime. And and I've invited Ellie, my longtime friend, who is a big Legacy fan. He likes stats, which I like a lot. He's an archetype specialist when it comes to lands, and he has a very busy life with work and family. So I thought he was a pretty good representative to kind of get that angle of time is an issue, resources are an issue. We love this format to death. How can we find some kind of mix between that point of view and then the classic grinder view on things? Ellie has built a website called, is it Lords of Legacy? Is that correct?
Lord of Legacy, yeah.
Lord of Legacy, okay, perfect. Where you basically just see the raw numbers, no like emotions attached, just raw numbers to, analyze metagames, check out win rates, etc., etc. So, Ellie, welcome, my friend. It's awesome that you're here.
Thank you so much. It's very fun to be here.
Yeah, because I know you care a lot about stats, but you also have a past as, someone who was kind of frustrated with your own deck's positioning in the metagame, and we're going to talk a little bit about that later. But first of all, historically, which cards typically get banned in Legacy? What's like the threshold when it comes to the raw numbers? Do you have any references when it comes to that?
Yeah, so if you look at historical announcements from Wizard of the Coast, so for example, when they banned Renin 6, they specifically published the win rate of Rug Delver with Renin 6, which they said was 56.5%.
Okay.
Non-mirror win rate. So we know that if a deck wins, more than 55%, around 56%, that's considered too high from Wizard of the Coast. At least it has been in the past. And we also know that when they banned Expressive Iteration and White Plume Adventure, those decks, like Blue Red Delver, had around 30% of the meta. Didn't win more than 55%. I think it won 54% of the non-mirror matches, but it had almost 30%, almost a third of the format was Blue Red Delver, and the White Initiative deck was about 20%.
Right.
We know that if a deck is touching 20% or higher and wins above 55%, then we know that it will be on there. They will notice that.
Right.
Start thinking about bans.
Right. I think that's very good reference points, because one thing is that I don't have a problem with. I want a balanced format, that's in my ideal world. I will personally play any format and take it as a challenge if there's a best deck, but I prefer, the balance. I prefer to have multiple choices when I'm picking a deck, because I can play most decks. I like to have them as actual options if my main purpose is to win. So Wizards balancing out the format that way, I have no problem with. I have a little bit of a problem with once we start getting into the peer pressure from the community. I'm especially worried about minorities being loud, because there's really no way to tell if we have 20 dissatisfied players or 20,000 dissatisfied players, because you can easily it can kind of get multiplied on social media, if that makes sense. So getting back to the basics with these actual numbers from Wizards, historical precedents, I think that's just the right way to approach this, in my opinion. We're trying to add some nuance and context to the whole grief sucks takes. So if you look at the current numbers, we're talking about blue black reanimator specifically. And that deck's kind of rise, I don't know, maybe from the beginning of this year until now. How does the current numbers look for that deck?
I mean, so blue-black Risk Animator, which is, the blue-black scam deck that plays Entomb and Reanimate. If you look at like the winners meta for the last, say, 6 months, 3 to 6 months, if you only look at showcase challenges, which are the most competitive challenges online, it's had around between 18 to 20% meta share. So it's up there. I mean, it's not like Blue Red Delver was with 30%, but it's still up around 20% of the meta, so a fifth of the decks. It wins a lot. So it's had, like, for the last 6 months, it's had 56.2% win rate, which is up there with what Wizard quoted for Rug Delver being too good with Renin 6. I think for the last, since they banned Sticker Goblin, it's been winning even more. And I think this is, well, I don't know this. I don't think this was on purpose, but so the problem was that, so the meta was blue black Risk Animator was the best deck, and the second best deck was Sticker, like the Turbo Goblins deck, and then they banned something from the second best deck. So now the best deck, just like the distance between the best deck and the second best deck, just got bigger
Yeah.
by that ban. So I think, because if you look at last 2 weeks, it's probably winning like 58-59% of the non-mirror matches. So it's definitely winning too much, in my opinion, and it has for a long time. It's not only for like a few weeks. It's, for the last 6 months, it's been winning
Right.
a bit too much.
What do you think? So yeah, great insight. First of all, that's just very reasonable take. That if you take out, also it was kind of by chance or by it was random that the Sticker Goblin got banned. It wasn't for power level reasons. It was logistics. So, and there the gap was even wider. Why do you think that players are kind of slow to catch on? Because you say the stats say it's been the best deck for 6 months, but even for me, it hasn't been more than like 1 or 2 months that I have been certain it was the best deck. Like, what do we know about like players? Why are they so slow to adapt? I guess would be the way to say it here.
Yeah. So I mean, if we look a little bit, so I tend to classify like legacy players in a few categories. So, or like Magic players in general. So if you take the best players, like the professional Magic players, I don't think any of those really play Legacy, at least not regularly. And I never see any of them on Twitter writing, Grief should be banned or Chalice should be banned. Like, they don't seem like there's an emotional investment in the format as such. Then if you take like the young players, like the young superstars or Zoomers or whatever you want to call them, like these players like Juju Bean, they are super good in all. They play all formats. They will typically pick up the best deck and make it better. So they obviously play Legacy regularly, but I don't see them complaining about bans either.
Right.
And then you have like deck specialists like myself. We are like, not always, but a lot of us are slightly older, like, above 30, between 30 and 40. I'm 40, by the way. We have a lot of emotional investment. So we specialize in one deck, or one archetype. Say, like, I'm the the Green Sansini player, or I'm the Chalice of the Void player, or whatever. And we have like 10,000 reps with our deck. We pimped it out. We spent a lot of money buying beta duels or tabernacles or whatever. We make them pay alters to alter our cards. Like, we're really invested, both financially and emotionally, in the format and in the deck of the format. And the other thing is that we don't also have so much time. Like, if you look at me, like, if I can play one challenge a month, that's a good month, probably. Right. So I can't take like a Sunday. I can't take many Sundays off just to play the challenge. So every tournament means a lot to me. Like, because if you think about it, you want to top 8 the tournament, and if you only play 2 tournaments a year, then somehow it becomes more important how you do in those tournaments, which is a stupid thing to do because I did the math. Like some time ago, I did the math. Like if you win, like the best legacy players, they win around 60 to 70% of the matches they play. And so if you assume that your win rate is 60%, which is then you're one of the absolute best legacy players.
Right.
If you run an 8-round tournament and you need to go 7-1, if you just think about it, if you throw a coin and you have a 60% chance to win, and you need to win 7. You throw it 8 times, so you need to win 7 times.
Yeah.
Probability of that happening is less than 20%. It's maybe 15%.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, if you only play 2 tournaments a year, I really want to top 8. That's the probability of that happening is going to be so low, even if you're really good. It's kind of it's a bit of it's like a bad spiral in a sense.
Yeah, the emotional investment doesn't hold up against the actual odds, right? You're basically setting yourself up for failure at that point, unless you have like a great mindset.
Yeah. It basically means more likely than not, you're not going to achieve what you want to do.
Yeah.
Because you played too little. And at the same time, it means more for you. Like every tournament where you fail, which is the most likely outcome, like you get more upset about. So it's a really bad spiral.
It makes sense if you play 10 challenges every week, you just have more shots in the chamber to try and do well. There's always the next tournament. Yeah. If you're busy with family and work, maybe you can not play until 3 months. So it just means more for you in the short term, and that's where like the emotions come into play. And you also talked about the passion and the dedication to one deck, where for people like me, I don't care about any single deck. I love the game. I'll play whatever the rules they give me. So that I guess makes me more resilient in the face of imbalanced metagames, stuff, new printings people don't agree with, or whatever it is. Like that's definitely a good field for me to have. That cards get banned, sure. New cards get printed, sure. I'll just take on the challenge, but I accept that not everybody has enough time to have that mindset, because I think it's a time thing. A lot of the time.
Yeah. No, I definitely agree. And these like people in my category, like the deck specialists, the older player with less time, play less. These are the ones that I hear mostly complain about bans. And it kind of trickles down, because then you have like paper players who play even less, right? So you have players who only play like weekly tournaments in
local games,
or maybe not even. Yeah, exactly. So they play in paper. They don't get as many reps online, or they don't play online at all.
Right.
But they probably follow Patreons. They are on Discord, read a lot of stuff. So some of them, I think, this is maybe a speculation, but I think some of them will get an opinion.
Yeah, like adopted, like secondhand.
Yeah. So maybe I have like 1,300 followers on Twitter.
Ooh, so you're moving up the ranks in the world.
What if I, now I haven't played a challenge in quite some time. So what if I go and say, okay, the next PTQ I'm gonna play, and then I get grief twice and lose, go 0-2 drop, and then I go on Twitter and say, oh, grief has to be banned. It's so boring. It's like the only thing I faced grief all the time. These opinions are like they're based on my emotion in the moment. I think where most of it is actually me being really disappointed that I did horribly in the one tournament that I got to play, in a sense.
Right.
But then a lot of people will read it and just take that as fact, I think. So I think a lot of these players, they are like, I wouldn't call them famous, but they have like a platform, an online platform, and a voice. I think it's more like it's more important for us to actually calm down a little bit and behave, because I think there's too much negativity in the legacy community, in my opinion.
Yeah, because also we need to uh, show the differences between this card is too strong and this card is not fun.
Yeah.
Because you can argue a lot of stuff in Magic isn't fun. When my opponent's deck works as intended, maybe the chances it's not very fun for me because Magic decks are built to win the game. Like, I'm talking about competitive Magic decks here. I'm not talking about how do we have a nice commander night with the boys. I'm talking about how do we win our next tournament, if that's the objective. And that's my objective here on this channel. That's competitive Magic, which for me means win at all costs within the rules of the game, obviously. So one thing is, it's not fun to lose 2 cards to Grief turn 1. The other thing is it too strong? And Wizards recently flirted with the idea that community sentiment and data will be taken into account, which is, I was told it wasn't the first time they said that, which I didn't research it, but I'm open for that possibility that they have mentioned that before, and that it hasn't really been a problem historically, which is true. But it's just so easy to go on Twitter and say that something is bad and start some kind of negative motion these days. It's just such a powerful platform when it comes to that. And even if I try every Sunday to publish legacy results that show like diversity, I'm saying, whoa, these format like archetype experts, they keep winning, like with Storm, with Control. It's really tough because every time I do that, I receive like pushback. So it's very tough to deafen the negativity with positivity, even though I prefer that. Like that's just the best thing to be doing. Try and beat negativity with positivity. That's my logic anyway. But it's very, very, very tough. I wanted to ask you about something because you, as we talked about briefly, you've been dedicated to land for a number of years. I remember you bought some like beta taigas or whatever. That was kind of your, or was it a tabernacle? There was some story in one of your articles about how you kind of devoted. This is like the talisman of now I'm a lands player, stuff like that. But what have you experienced any situations in previous metagames where you're like, whoa, my deck is bad. What can I do about this? And how did you react in those cases? Because Mono White Initiative, Iteration, I remember Dreadhorde Arcanist, Astrolabe, all of these cards were kind of bad for lands because the other decks were just better.
Yeah, I think there have been two. Like I played lands since Deathbird Shaman was legal, so I don't know how many years, but we're talking 5 years or more.
I remember because we qualified for the Team Pro Tour with 4-color control, so that's a bit more than 6 years ago.
Yeah, okay. So I've been playing it more than 6 years. And there are 2 times, okay, there are more, but there are like 2 episodes where I know that Landsverse is not well positioned. So, I mean, if you ignore, like, you know, the Turbo Tybalt madness, that was only 2 weeks. But so what happened with War of the Sparks? Like, so the way I learned lands and the way I like to play it was with, you know, for Richard and Port. I love, like, what I think is really fun is when my opponent can't cast anything. So when my deck function, definitely it will not be fun for my opponent, right? Because they will have no lands and I will have spear resistance and choke and Richard and Ports. And that's how I wanted to play the deck. And then with War of the Sparks, they started printing like cheaper spells, cheaper threats, so like Narset and Teferi.
Ah, yeah, the 3 mana walkers. Yeah.
3 mana instead of 4 mana. Venom 6 costs 2 mana. Dreadhorde Arcane is also cost 2. Like, the threats just got better, cheaper. So the idea that you just stop your opponent from casting anything relevant wasn't really viable anymore. Like, you couldn't stop anyone from resolving a 2 mana Renin 6. And then they had all the lands they needed, so Wasteland was kind of meaningless. So my way of playing lands just didn't work. And the other idea was the way I beat control decks like Miracles was with Choke. But then Arkham's Astrolabe has made the blue decks not really need islands. They could fetch like Forest, Swamp, and Arkham's Astrolabe, and then they had all the mana they wanted.
Right.
So and then like players that were better than me, they tried to adopt. They told me like, hey, don't play Choke, don't play Richard and Port. We should play like Euro and Field of the Dead. So like you can build lands in another way, but I just refused to do that. So instead, I would just complain. Like
Right.
every day, I wrote on Twitter, Arkham's Astrolabe has to be banned. And I came up with all kinds of like amount of negativity that
Yeah.
I spent on one card. Where kind of there were other ways. Like I tested the blue-green lands deck that actually had a really good matchup against Snowco. Like we had Cavern of Souls and Primeval Titan. Like there were ways to go over that deck, and I just didn't want. Like I didn't want to listen. And I remember when they banned. So I think they banned Oko, Astrolabe, and was it also Dreadhorde in the same?
That's
I think
how
they
I
banned
remember
three
it, but
cards.
it's kind of blurry at the point.
Yeah, and even then they said, like in the announcement, they said that Arkham's Astrolabe decks didn't have. So they quoted that Rug Delver had a 56.5% non-mirror win rate, and they said we're also banning Astrolabe, even though that deck is not winning as much.
Uh-huh.
So even there, I think they quoted like sentiment of the sort of
Okay.
community.
Yeah.
I'm not saying they listened to me personally, but there were a lot of people like Blood Moon players. I said no, you shouldn't be allowed to play Blood Moon in a 5-color deck. I used those arguments as well, but that was mostly because I wanted Astrolabe banned.
Yeah.
Even
Which it ended up
uh,
getting, and I think it's relevant to wonder, was it too good or was it unfun, and what was the combination of like Wizard's decision? I
yeah,
think that's just interesting to think about, because something I thought about from this morning was Legacy has to be fun. It needs to be a format people want to play, because nobody wants tournaments not firing or
yeah.
yeah. I mean, nobody wants that. So I'm looking for kind of the perfect balance between players like the format and players don't go to Twitter every time they lose to some annoying card. Like I want a
Yeah.
combination of those two, because it is necessary that we have a player base that's willing to play on a regular basis. So I'm mainly looking at an ideal combination there.
Yeah.
And thank you for sharing those, because now you can see, like, after the fact, that you had some kind of agenda, but putting negativity out in the world maybe wasn't the best
Oh,
action.
and like a few years later, so what happened actually? So to continue so what happened was that Astrolabe got banned. My way of playing lands got good again. Like Richard and Port and Choke became super good. And I actually came second in one of these showcase the 24-man
Ooh,
qualifiers.
the big one.
And yeah, the big one, and I qualified for the Pro Tour online one. And I think that entire episode grew me a lot as a player. So what happened was, for like a few months, I didn't play any Legacy at all. I just played Standard and Pioneer. So I downloaded Arena on my phone, and I bought like an article. And then I actually said, okay, I need to learn new formats. I don't have a lot of time, so I'm going to play the best decks in both formats. And in Standard at the time, it was mono green aggro. So I bought like a primer from Redo on mono green aggro, and I started learning like the aggro line, how to do like a mana curve, do like combat math and stuff.
Right.
Then when I came back, Legacy, I said, okay, now I'm gonna really test Ursa Saga, because at the time, like Ursa Saga had been legal for like half a year,
Yeah.
And it was like a big debate in the lands community if you should play that or Valakut Exploration, which was the deck I played before. And then I started saying, okay, I'm just gonna do like what I learned with the aggro strategy and just run people over with constructs. It turned out that it's much better, much more competitive. Like the power level of Ursa Saga is just so high. So, and I think that whole episode kind of taught me that okay, there's a good idea. Like if something doesn't work, try something else because there are like solutions to these problems. Then what happened was that they printed like the initiative mechanic and White Plume Adventure, and that deck was insanely good against lands. Because first of all, they played like 8 Swords of Plowshares. Merit Ledge felt like non-go. And again, we couldn't prison like their 3 mana, like they have Ancient Tomb and a 3 mana spell that just wins the game. Like we can't get back the emblem. And how do you stop someone from casting like a 3 mana spell with Ancient Tomb? It's very, very hard. So what happened then was I told myself, look, I'm not going to be negative. So I tested all kinds of things. I couldn't beat it. But then I said, okay, now I will play it instead. Then,
Yeah,
okay,
I remember. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So basically, you took
Okay, I'm gonna
your
learn
experience from preparing for the Pro Tour to kind of look at more like problem solving rather than complaining when it comes to Legacy.
Yes.
Okay, that's cool.
I mean, I kind of was. I was a bit like I wasn't so happy with myself how I reacted with Arkham's Astrolabe. So I said, okay, I'm not going to complain all the time. I'm going to do something else. And then this is something I think a lot of deck specialists notice. So then I said, okay, I'm going to learn the initiative deck. So I picked it up. Initially, I won a lot. The deck was really good. And I started playing like more competitively tournaments like prelims instead of leagues.
Yeah.
And I started playing a lot of mirror matches. It got a lot harder. And I think this is the thing, if you have like 10,000 reps with one deck, you know exactly what to do in all situations. But in all matchups, you know your role. You know what, the problem is not knowing what to do, but you can still punt, of course, and make mistakes. But then you pick up a new deck, and all of a sudden, you don't know what to do. And this is like, you get very uncomfortable, at least I do.
Yeah.
I started, it felt like I was just clicking on cards on the screen, like without purpose. And that is like feeling like out of control a little bit. And you just need to get past that and get the reps in with the new deck. And if you don't have a lot of time and you don't like being uncomfortable, like it's cringe playing a new deck because
Yes.
you just don't know what to do. And you have like a mental picture of yourself being like this super
Yeah, you're well
person.
versed. You've practiced, your sword, your samurai,
Yeah.
but you know your sword. But now you have a new sword.
Exactly.
It's uncomfortable. Makes a lot of
It is
sense.
uncomfortable. Yeah. So I actually, like, after a few weeks of the White Initiative deck, I just stopped playing. I said, okay, I'm taking a break because I don't want to complain. I don't want to learn this deck. And Lance is not competitive. So I took a break, and then I actually came back with Lance and did fairly well. But that's not really the point of the story. All I'm saying is that, like, I've seen, like, I really have sympathy for people that complain because I'm like in the same situation. Like, I know if you're invested so much in a specific archetype and that archetype is not good anymore, it doesn't feel good, and it's not easy to pick up a new deck if you because you have to mentally accept that you're going to be a lot worse than you're kind of used to.
Yeah.
But you're going to be like, if you win 6 out of 10 games, you're maybe going to win 4 out of 10 games.
Yeah.
You're going to lose more than you win. Like, that's just how it is. And you're not going to know if you make mistakes either. So you're going to say, okay, maybe I could have won, but I didn't really know what to do.
Yeah. Go ahead.
That's kind of how it is. Like, if you want to become better, that's what you have to do. You have to accept that, okay, remember when you picked up lands? I lost a lot for the first 6 months. At that time, I wasn't like used to winning, so it didn't really matter.
Right.
Whereas now I'm kind of mentally I'm up here, and then I have to go down here in
Mm-hmm.
kind of win rate.
That's a good
And
point as
it's just
well. You
hard.
built yourself up, so having confidence is good. But then, if that makes it harder for you to learn new things because you have some kind of new standard all of a sudden, it's not really
Yeah.
a strength. That kind of confidence. You also need the humility to look within and say, "Okay, I started from the bottom with Lance and took it as a challenge." Like
Mhm.
learning a new language, you're going to be very bad in the beginning, but it's kind of cool
Yeah.
to get to the top of that mountain, and all of a sudden you can speak a new language. Like it's kind of the same thing here, I would say.
Yeah.
And it makes a lot of sense that taking a break instead of spreading negativity, even though you love Legacy with all your heart. Like I really respect that because that takes a lot of that takes a lot. It's way easier to just start the complaint wagon up and see
Yeah.
where that takes you. That's way easier. So I definitely
Yeah.
respect that a lot. Another topic I want to pick your brain about is the trend of how Wizards of the Coast are printing new cards. Do you see some trend? Like let's just say the last 5 years or since the 3-mana walkers. Like what's the general trend
Yeah.
of the new printings?
Yeah. So I mean, there's a power creep, of course. Like if you look at any any card that recently is just much better than the old one, and especially the threats. I
Right.
mean, in the olden days, the answers were probably better than the threats.
Oh yeah.
Like Swords of Plushes, 1 mana, remove anything. Force of Will, cost nothing, and answer anything. But now, with new printings, I think the power creep is mostly on the threats. So they're cheaper, they have same mana cost on threats, they kill faster. So, and then some of them snowball. I think Wizard has learned a little bit. So a few years ago, they just printed like every threat drew a card. It felt like Dreadhorde Arcanist just kept on drawing cards. Euro draw cards when you cast it, then when you get it back, then when you attack. Like, but the threats were snowballing in the sense that if they stayed in play more than one turn, you just lost. Those threats are typically the ones that Wizard bans, in my experience, like Ren and Six, Ragavan, Dreadhorde Arcanist. So the threats that snowballs in card advantage and are cheap, those are the ones that usually gets banned.
Right.
Um,
And in
Even then,
general, those things apply to all formats. So in general, you have less time to stumble in Magic than you used to.
yeah,
I would say that's like
yeah.
general for all formats. Like whether it's Sheldred or the one you talk about on the Legacy ban list, it's kind of the same thing, right? If you miss a land drop or you don't have a removal spell, things can spiral quickly. So, I mean, it's just
No, I
new.
agree.
It's different, in my opinion. I can't say, oh, I prefer the old times where we killed with a 1/1 nimble mongoose until you finally hit threshold on turn 6.
Mm,
I can't say I prefer
yeah,
either. It's just different to me.
yeah. I just think a lot of the time in the olden days, if you played reactive, you could use your life
Yeah.
as a resource
Oh
in a
yeah.
sense. You could say, okay, I'm gonna take 3 hits, nimble mongoose or whatever. I'm gonna take
Yeah.
these amount of hits, and I'm gonna focus on something else, and then I'm gonna answer everything with the terminus or like with lands. Like I'm gonna develop my board, play exploration and some lands, and then eventually I'm gonna answer this thing. I think that is just harder to do now, much harder. So either if you're facing Ragavan or Euro or a card that just draws a card every turn it stays in play, you just get rolled over. But even if you don't face those cards, like Murktide just kills you in 2 turns.
Yeah. And
Or
there's a saga, as
Broadsword.
you mentioned. It's kind of the same. Miss a
Yeah,
beat against lands, and you can just lose to 2/5/5s.
yeah. And now also they have the new equipment that gives haste. So
Yeah.
Ursa Saga is even faster. Like if you play against the Affinity deck or the 8-cost deck, like because I started playing Pest Control, so I felt okay. Hey, it's a clean answer to Ursa Saga, but even that might be too slow, right?
Right.
To get enough value from your Meltdown or Pest Control, you need them to make 2 constructs, and then you cast your thing. And now, if the second construct have haste, you might just be dead.
Right. So all of this is just to say that they have kind of shown that they want to print powerful cards, which will make older cards unplayable, maybe. Which is something that I can see why I would be sad about. Like, I have a few favorite cards from Vintage, for example. I can't play those now. And that's just, you can either adapt to it or you can not adapt to it, I feel like. I don't feel like there's any other, any other reaction that makes any sense. So for me, it's all about reacting to the new world, but that also takes resources. Definitely. Times were way simpler when we played at the local game store every Tuesday. We played against mostly like 6 different decks, some more competitive than others, but that was like our small pond, if that makes sense. But the big pond right now is the internet. It's great players coming up with ideas, and you can just see deck lists in an instant after the tournament has been played. So information travels so quickly. Back in the day, we locked into like, oh, let's go to mtgthesource.com and see if there's any update to this threat. Like, we didn't care too much about, is this deck, like, is this a 51% win rate deck, or is this 48, or is this 56? We had no idea, I would imagine. It was simpler times, but now when you can just see with science that this deck is better than that deck, then of course it creates meta shifts like this, and I think it's very interesting how the information age impacts Magic in general.
Yeah, but also the money, right? Because if you play online, you can rent cards. So if you're a good player, there's nothing financially stopping you from playing the best deck. Whereas I remember like some of the best players in our local game store, like Oscar, Goblins, right? Because that was probably, he was so young. That was the deck he could afford.
Yeah.
Whereas, you don't really see like the young Zoomers now. They can play anything they want. Like, you don't see like 16-year-old not being able to play Delver or whatever.
Yeah,
that is the best deck.
The barrier of entry is mostly gone when you talk about online play. And that's definitely a thing as well, because in real life, you like buying cards is some kind of hassle. Not only does it take time, it also takes money. And then as a result, the metagame will be different. If I go to the local game store and play tomorrow night, it's actually quite funny. Back in 15, 17 years ago, I was one of the persons who started the local legacy scene here in Copenhagen, and they still play to this day, which is awesome. But the metagame is way different there than it would be when I played Legacy Qualifier on this weekend. So that's just how it is. But I think it's a matter of resources and level of competitiveness as well.
Yeah.
I want to dig a little bit into a topic of the fun aspect of getting grief twice is not fun, which is something that I've seen many places. So now I'm not talking about its power level. We will get to that in the end when we kind of give our suggestion on how to react from here, from Wizard's point of view. But now this is basically the one that's way less easy to quantify, because if it's not fun getting discarded twice on turn 1, then I will ask as the devil's advocate. I'll say, is it fun to get Blood Mooned? Is it fun to get Chaliced with a bunch of spells stranded in hand? Is it fun to play against Alli and get Wasteland Loamed? Is it fun to get Stifled on your first fetch land so you can't play Magic? I would argue no. Or you can kind of accept that that's what Magic, that comes with Magic. It's, for me, it's like mulligan to 5, that's not fun either. It's part of the game. Missing your whatever land drop, it's not fun, but it's part of the game. So at what point, like, how do we quantify fun, and why do you think that, is that even reasonable?
Well, I mean, to me, I don't understand those arguments. Like, I don't understand how you can say that you should ban a card because it's not fun. Because I agree with what you said. Like, you can definitely argue that any competitive legacy deck, when that works, will not be fun for the opponent.
Right.
Like, even if you take if you take the most unfair deck like Doomsday, They will have turn 1 Doomsday force backup.
Yeah.
How is that fun? Like you didn't get to do anything, or the black red reanimated deck. Like they will grief you or unmask you, and then get a Griselbrand in play on turn 1. How or even the lands deck, right? Like when I'm having the most busted hands, so like say Exploration, Wasteland, Loam against the Delver opponent. How is that fun for my opponent? Like they have no lands in play, all the creatures die. Like obviously, like when a good legacy deck function, it will take all the fun. That player will have all the fun. So you can't really. I mean, I don't understand how you can say that getting discarded is less fun than Blood Moon or Chalice of the Void. I mean, it's
Okay, so to you,
it's the same.
those are the same. They're either all fun or not fun. Like they're this
When it works,
equal
yeah.
amount of fun.
Yeah. I mean, there's like you have to accept that if your opponent is having a good draw in Legacy, the game will not be that fun for you.
Right.
Even if you play against a super fair deck like Delver, which is probably the most fair Legacy deck, and they have the busted hand of like turn 1 Delver, turn 2 Delver, and Days Wasteland. You didn't do anything. Like the opponent couldn't do anything. They
Yeah.
just lost.
Yeah. Yeah. I think
But
that's my take on it. That's actually a good one. That whenever a legacy deck functions, the goal is to make it unfun for the opponent, basically.
the goal is to win. Like in a slam dunk, you want to win in a slam dunk manner,
Yeah.
and then you take all the fun. Then, so I guess the only thing that matters is one, the meta share. It's like I really hate playing against, Lionside Diamond, Echo Vions, Hull Breacher, these
Right.
type of decks.
Uh-huh.
They have like 0.1% of the meta, so like it's super unfun to play those matchups, and I lose. Almost never do it. So you can't really, you don't hear people complain that Echo Vions should be banned, right?
Yeah, so it's like
And
how frequent does that experience occur, basically?
yes. So it's more. I think meta share is what, like if a deck is 30% of the meta, that's the problem. It's
Yes.
not that if it's fun or not, because you could say that no deck is fun when they really function.
Yeah,
Um,
I like that a lot. It's not like we have to agree, but I agree with
yeah,
that it's how frequent do I experience this that I don't find
yeah,
fun, and
yeah,
that can of course get to a point where it can be a problem combined with the win rate, of course. Before we get into
yeah.
solutions, I have one more point I'm going to throw at you. So for vintage, if you can't really keep up with like new printings, new decks, like the new world order of companions, etc., you can go and play old school. Very popular format.
Yeah.
If the same is true for
Yeah.
legacy, you can go and play pre-modern. What's your reaction to that suggestion?
Well, my counter arguments. So I agree. You can go and play pre-modern. I think there are two things stopping people like me probably. So the one is what I said, that you would have to accept that you become worse again.
Oh, like giving up
So
or
it's like,
throwing the towel? Oh, you mean starting
well,
a
no,
new
no,
thing?
no,
Okay, got it. Yeah,
yeah, exactly. So
yeah,
so if I because I could play Delver, right? If Lance is bad, I could learn Delver, but then I have to accept that I'm going to be like pretty bad for a few months.
yeah.
And you have the same kind of hurdle using a different format. You'll also have to accept that you're going to be worse.
Yes.
So that's one reason why people maybe don't do it. The other one is throwing in the towel. I agree, like the mental thing that I give up, like I did during initiative. Yes, okay, I'm not going to play Legacy now. I'm going to take a break. That is like a mental thing that you have to get over. And the third one is probably, can you play pre-modern online?
You can, yes. There is a
Okay.
there are privately organized tournaments on Magic Online even.
Okay. Yeah, but I mean, I guess those are like uh, those are probably arguments why people don't switch format. But I think it's a good point. Like maybe you should, like, when I was really frustrated with Legacy, maybe I should have tried to learn Modern. Because when I had to learn Standard, it was actually really fun. I had a lot of fun playing Arena, learning how to play an aggro deck. And there, I just had to do it, right? Because I was qualified for like Pro Tour, which is like, I know that it's very unlikely I will ever qualify for that tournament again. So I had to, like, mentally, whatever I said, like, I just had to accept that I have to, do as best as I can to learn this format. And I also had a lot of fun doing it. So, and I think a lot of deck specialists would. If you're tired of Legacy and your deck is not that good, try another format. I think it would be good for you.
Yeah. But in my opinion, trying another format or trying a different deck in Legacy should be like the same process. It's something new that will inevitably make you stronger, not only as a player, but also as a person, I would imagine. Like, trying to maneuver the tough obstacles on your way. I just find that, like, that's strong. Like, that's something I want to have as an ability as a human in general. No matter if I play Magic on the internet or I maneuver in real life, I want to be a problem solver, right? That should be the ideal. But of course, we can get to a certain point where the health of the format is at stake, and that brings us to our suggested solutions. So I have a list here, and we can go kind of back and forth. And the first one is, let's wait and see the effect of Modern Horizons 3. So my initial thoughts about that is, I didn't check the spoiler well enough, but I would be very surprised if something came out of MH3 that kind of invalidated or made Blue-Black Reanimator a mediocre strategy all of a sudden.
Yeah. I think what I've seen of the spoilers, it feels like Modern Horizon 3 is the lowest power level of all the Modern Horizon sets that I've seen. I know, like Ragavans or Ren and 6. There are some good cards, but I don't think there's anything I will like. There are some pushed Eldrazi's. I think like an ancient tomb. They can come a new ancient tomb deck, like an Eldrazi Stompy deck. Maybe they can take some meta share, like Turbo Moxus was super strong. Maybe there can be like more good cards for an ancient tomb strategy and make that stronger and take some of the meta share from the blue-black deck. But otherwise, like, the best card is probably the blue-black frog, which just slots perfectly into the Rescaminator deck. So I think that deck also gets better in Modern Horizon 3.
Yeah, that's interesting for sure. I have my eyes on that card. It's like, I have high hopes for that card in Legacy and Modern. But it's actually a good point that if you add that on top of what we already have available for Blue-Black, it can be rough. So I guess we can settle on, we don't have any hopes of MH3 switching up the metagame enough, so we have to look at another solution, basically.
Yeah, I think so. I think I definitely think that a ban is like should happen.
So next up, we have Grief itself. Banning Grief.
Yeah.
So from my point of view, banning Grief will be a minor setback, but I qualified for the Magic Champion Showcase with Griefless Blue-Black, which is kind of funny.
Yeah.
And I've seen people play like Void Walkers, Bowmasters in metagames where Unfair isn't as played. Maybe that was bad deck building. Who knows? And I feel like we can replace Grief with something else and still have the more or less same power level. Like, what's your take on banning Grief?
Yeah, I don't think they should ban Grief. I think my opinion is, if Wizard were to ban Grief, it would change nothing.
Okay.
Like, the blue-black deck would still be the best deck. It would still win as much. I mean, it would be worse. in some matchups. Like I played a lot of like black-white scam
Right.
last few months, and like turn one grief against a combo deck is so strong. Like you pick, so say you play against Doomsday, and you pick Doomsday and the Dark Ritual, and then you have like a flip Delver of Secret in play. That will often be enough to kill them. Like you will kill them before they manage to.
Yeah,
You bought yourself so
recover.
much time. Exactly. Playing Grief, a turn one Grief against a fair deck, I don't think that wins by itself. Like you need to follow up with something. So
Yeah.
if you play like against Death and Taxes, the first Grief has to take the swords, right? You take swords, and then you take like a Stoneforge Mystic. Then you still need to follow that up with something, or you will that Grief will not kill the Death and Taxes opponent by itself.
Yeah, the point is there's this time window where the opponent can recover.
Yes.
And I mean, I've turned one double grief. Plenty of people and lost, and the reverse and beat turn one double grief with fair decks especially. So I agree with that point that it's a very, very potent tool against unfair, especially because it comes with the 3/2 body. But against fair, it's very hit or miss.
Yeah, and like again in the mirror, it's kind of like I lost so many times where I griefed my opponent and then they reanimated my grief.
Yeah, that's one of the toughest things. Like I've been playing a lot of blue-black and deciding when to grief, and with the risk of getting punished. I actually think that's interesting game dynamics, but I realize that is that is like very subjective. Just as grief is boring, then grief is exciting. Like it's just as subjective. That's just my point of view. That actually slow rolling your grief with the risk that comes with that, or playing it out with the risk that comes with that. I like that actually.
I would like to challenge everyone that writes on Twitter that they lost to grief. I would like them to watch a replay and think if they really lost to grief. Because, like, maybe your opponent grief you on turn one. Did they then reanimate grief and that creature killed you? Like, did that creature swing like 6 times or 8 times or 7 times and kill you? Or did they follow up with something? Like, if that grief had been a Thoughtseize, instead, like, because that's what if you ban grief, people will probably play Thoughtseize instead. So if you lost, so your opponent went grief turn one and then entomb Atraxa turn two. Would you have won if they instead went Thoughtseize turn one and then entomb Atraxa? Like, would it have changed anything?
Yeah,
I don't think it would.
In general, I think it's tough to narrow it down to one reason why you lost a game. I think in general, then you're selling the game short. That's kind of an offense to, like, that's kind of offending towards the best game of all time that you lost because of one thing. So in general, every time I read stuff like that, it's really selling the game short, because the game is so much more than one spell being like deciding the game, or one sequence, right?
Yeah.
Fair enough. So we don't want to ban grief, but there is still the fun aspect. If enough people are complaining about grief, if we can potentially lose players, and that's like what the sentiment that Wizards is getting, we can lose a lot of players. That would be a reason for them as a corporation to ban grief. Would you agree?
Yeah, sure. I mean, if enough players think that getting discarded turn one is not fun, and they stop playing Magic or stop playing Legacy, and of course there's a financial argument for them banning the card. But I just think that, I mean, I still feel like no one complained about Thoughtseize.
Right.
I never heard anyone say that Thoughtseize should be banned.
I have played I played against one opponent who, this is funny because this is a one-off, and that opponent said, "Great job," sarcastically, that I was able to play correctly. And his argument was that playing discard spells is kind of like cheating, because then I know how to sequence my spells, which removal spells to keep, which is both funny, but it's also, there's something to be said about a card like Gitaxian Probe and how much of a free roll that card was, and how well you can craft your game plan if you know your opponent's hand. But that's like a minor argument, mainly a funny anecdote of that it was like cheating, casting Thoughtseize over and over and knowing what my opponent was up to. And I also think mainly people are worried about getting discarded twice on turn 1. It's not the discard spell, it's the I lose my 2 best cards, and how do I go? How do I go from here? I think what people forget in this is that the opponent also invested 3 cards in this, 3 spells, Reanimate Grief and another black card. Sometimes we can choose which black card to pitch. Sometimes we can't. Sometimes the 3/2 in play is better than a card. Sometimes it's not. I think it kind of just makes, we both mulligan to 4-ish. And then the opponent's land spell ratio could be because you play a low land count deck, so let's say you play against someone who has 4 lands in their opener, then all of a sudden 80% of their remaining cards are lands, and that is an advantage for you, because maybe only 33 of your remaining cards are lands, because you play a low land count deck. But that's like the more like the details around how favored am I with that opening. But then back to our other point is most decks have great, like whether it's Ancient Tomb, Chalice for 1, that's a great opening that'll give you the advantage against a lot of tier 1 decks. Turn 1 Trinity Sphere, turn 1 Blood Moon, the same. So why is this different? I think that point still holds true. Next on the list is ban Orcish Bowmaster from Legacy. What's your take on that?
Yeah, so my kind of immediate take is that I think that's the most likely they will do. And I also think I like that choice, to be honest. Because if you think about it, if you look at the meta before Lord of the Rings was printed, it was like, first of all, no one complained about Grief at that time. Like, Grief was played in the Black-Red Reanimate deck. It was played a little bit in Death Shadow. But those decks had less than 10% of the meta. No one complained.
Yeah.
Like, everyone actually said that the format was good. Then Troll of Khazad-dûm and Bowmaster were printed in the same set, and this kind of blue-black shell came and grew into the best deck. So I think if we just ban it, it's likely it will weaken the shell for sure. And it also, Bowmaster, I think people might forget how it makes the format much smaller. Like, there are some decks that were played quite a lot before. They're almost unplayable now, like Cephalid Breakfast.
Ah, yes, 1 toughness creatures, yes.
Yeah, exactly. Like the 1 toughness creatures, like Cephalid Breakfast had quite a lot of the meta share. Everyone liked to play against it. It's a very fun deck to play against, I think, because it's tricky. You can never tap out. It's
like Splinter Twin. I know you didn't play Modern, but it was the same.
Yeah.
How much do I respect the combo, and how good is their plan B to take advantage of the time they're given? Like, if I hold up removal spell, what can they do in the meantime? That's like the Splinter Twin. That's basically the dynamics of Splinter Twin back in Modern, where you can lose to the combo at the blink of an eye, but if you give them enough time, their plan B is also good enough to win normal games of Magic.
Exactly. It's like a super cool deck. Almost non-existent now.
Yeah.
Another one is like the elves, like the old elves deck. The Glimpse of Nature.
Yeah.
That was kind of played. Like, during Initiative era, that was almost the most popular elves deck at some point. Because it was pretty good.
I remember in some metagames that can be like a cool answer, like play a lot to the board, but the fact that your X1s are nerfed and your draw engine is nerfed by Bowmasters, that's easily played in a lot of decks. I like that a lot. Like, making the format bigger is definitely cool because we all want variety. We don't want just 3 different decks, rock paper scissors. Like, we don't want that. We want like more options to be viable than fewer. That's just to be preferred.
Yeah.
One counter argument is that the recent versions have focused so much on being ahead in the mirror that they either play 0 Bowmasters in the 75 or only have them in the sideboard, which is something that worries me a bit, because if it just plays Voidwalker to beat each other and Bowmasters is out because the format is not playing any X1s or, bad draw spells anyway, then you can kind of have the Bowmaster effect on the format without actually running it. That would be my main concern. That we get even more, closer to the graveyard supremacy.
Yeah. So, in my opinion, I think cutting Bowmaster is wrong. I don't understand why. You're kind of trying to next level the format.
Yes.
And it's kind of like days. Like you get you side out your days, and your opponent still plays around them.
Yeah. That's a great comparison, actually. That's very good, very accurate. From getting value from a card without playing it.
Yeah, but if you ban Bowmaster, then people wouldn't play around it, right?
Yes.
So it would change things.
Yes, then people don't... Yes, you're right. Then people's behavior in game would kind of go back to what it used to be, like better value brainstorms instead of, the bad turn one brainstorms while I have the chance. Like, then yes, people will get more mileage out of their cantrips, and maybe more X1s would see play.
I think definitely more. Like, even a card like in Death and Taxes, there's a 3/1 enchantment creature that prevents you from drawing extra cards.
Spirit of the Labyrinth.
That was played a lot before Bowmaster.
That's true, I remember.
So there are they will open up things. So I definitely think it will shake things up, banning. And it's also, I think it's a very, very strong card, like just individually strong card.
Oh yeah.
So banning it will lower the power level of the deck. I'm not saying that it's enough. It might not be enough because of this blue-black frog. If they just play that instead, or it might still be the best deck by far.
Right.
But it's at least, I think it's the most likely they will ban. And they will probably do like the Deathrite Shaman argument, saying it made the format too small.
Which I actually like, because it was the same in Modern. I'm sorry if you're talking about Modern. You never played Modern. But with Splinter Twin, at some point, the only blue decks in Modern were different variants of Splinter Twin. Jeskai, straight blue-red with Blood Moon, Sultai with... no, not Sultai. Temur with Tarmogoyf, Grixis with Kolaghan's Command and Thoughtseize. Only variants of Splinter Twin. So because of those reasons, it got banned. Which is kind of the same with Deathrite Shaman. And I can see Arcus Bowmaster, because we see a lot of decks play Bowmaster that, because it's just such an individual strong card, they, quote-unquote, shouldn't play Bowmasters, but they do because it's so strong and the cost is not that high. And in general, Wizards don't like those cards because... And also it alters, the play pattern on some of the most iconic cards. They have used that before. Like, I remember when they restricted Chalice of the Void in Vintage, they basically wrote, when people play Vintage, they play Vintage to cast Moxes, and this card stops them from doing that, so we restrict Chalice because, that's why we play the format. So they're kind of referring to format identity, which is something I could see with the Bowmasters and Brainstorm in Legacy as well. Because that's kind of like Legacy Moxes, if that makes sense. Okay, next on the list, this is the second to last one. We have ban either Entomb or Reanimate. And the reason why it's either one of those two is because if you take one of those two away, that's really taking the absolute cutting off the head, I would say, of the unfair angle.
Yeah. So if I were in charge, I would seriously consider banning Reanimate.
Okay.
I think it's the most broken card, or Entomb. It's the most broken card in the deck. Like it's what makes it function in a sense. Like you wouldn't play Black Risk Animator without Reanimated. I don't think it would work.
Right.
So you would probably, I don't know what you would do, but you would probably play like a tempo deck then instead. So if they really think that the deck is too strong, that's a good option, I think. There are some splash damage, like you would kill the black-red reanimated deck.
Yeah.
That would just not function either. But that actually, the counter argument to that is that could make other combo decks better. So I used to play Storm, and one of the absolute worst matchup was Reanimate.
Yeah, they're just faster, and you both play the same amount of discard. So they goldfish faster, but have the same disruption. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's kind of, and I know I follow Jax, very good combo player on Twitter.
Yeah.
And he always say that like Reanimate is just like it puts a lock on like it's like a tempo deck to the format in a sense because all like when Reanimate is popular, you can't really play combo like spell based combo like.
Yeah, then you just have a worse version of the same thing, basically.
Yes. So I'm not saying banning like just banning the whole archetype would be bad for Legacy. You might actually increase the diversity.
It's also a matter of do you want to nerf or do you want to kill? And a point about Reanimate I want to make is once people figured out that Reanimate is a good fair card, that's really what put it over the top. Because I remember back in the day when we played at the local game store, me and a friend of mine, Rasmus, you'll remember, we built like fair decks with a couple of Reanimates in it because we played like Baleful Strix, Stoneforge Mystic, stuff like that. And we kind of, and then maybe once in a while we would play against like Reanimator. It was kind of bad back then, and then we could reanimate their card and it was like a good story. But we really didn't believe it was that potent as a fair card. But it really is. Like, Thoughtseize are where your threat, daze your threat, reanimate. Then you get a discount on whatever you dazed or reanimated. And playing a lot of Cube really opened my eyes to this even more, where Reanimate is a top pick, even though you play blue-black control. It's an insane card because you get a discount on either your own creature or the opponent's. So that's just very strong. But you do have to worry about enfranchised players having played Reanimator for 8 years and you just kill their deck. Like, speaking about making the format bigger or smaller, it can be a calculated, decision to make. We lose some, we win some. But in general, I hate when people's decks just go to the bin. Basically, I really hate that because I can imagine how invested you are. I mean,
I can just think like if they banned Life on the Loam, I would be like, I would be devastated.
Yes.
Like, so say that there comes another strategy that plays Life on the Loam, and just totally broken. The blue deck or whatever. Yeah. They have 30% of the meta, and then they say, okay, we're just going to ban Life.
That is exactly it. There comes something else that, by chance, will affect someone who played like normal Reanimator. This blue-black, because black-red Reanimator is not a problem and hasn't been numbers-wise, right? But blue-black, when we add the blue cantrips and counterspells, you're more consistent, you have more protection. All of a sudden, we ended up with a problem. But that's not the black-red Reanimator player's fault, who foiled out all the whole deck and has it ready to go whenever there's a local tournament. So that's my biggest concern, is I have empathy for those players who are emotionally and financially invested. Yeah. But I do like it on, let's say, card availability wasn't an issue at all. Everybody had all cards. Then I like the suggestion, if that makes sense. But you really have to think wisely about decisions like that.
I also think all the arguments you just made, Wizard really thinks about. So I think it's like not even 1% chance that they will ban Reanimate.
Okay.
Like, it's just not what they do. Like, even if you see even when Delver was so strong, they didn't even mention that they would consider banning Daze.
Right.
I've never seen any where they've written, like, where they actually considered an old card, which is part of like the format staple or whatever you want to call it. So I just don't think it will happen. So there are good arguments for it, I think, but there are also good arguments against it. But even then, like, I don't think it will happen.
Right. Fair enough. So that's more like your own pick, where you kind of disregard the history of bannings, but We're more like from a clean slate perspective. Okay, I got it.
Yeah.
Then for the last suggestion, and I'll take the lead on this one because this is like my personal suggestion. I want to ban Troll of Khazad-dûm because similar to you, I don't think that one card is necessarily the problem. I think it's having so many good tools to bolster black in general that's a problem.
Yeah.
So by banning Troll, that will nerf the deck a lot because that's like your, I guess you can call it kind of entomb, build your own entomb card. It lets you cheat on lands. It lets you have a better black count for grief. That card does so much for so little that
makes you better against Blood Moon as well.
Great point. I sometimes use it like proactively against red, fetch out my swamp and cast my spells against Blood Moon. I do that against Wasteland when I need to like bridge the gap from not get Wastelanded this turn, but then kind of get to the next turn. This card has a lot of utility, like Shuffle for Brainstorm, you name it. And the card does not see play outside of this shell, so the negative effect is as small as it can be. Same arguments have been said for Lore Unrevealed and Vintage, kind of unrelated to this topic, but it's kind of the same where this is not something that you build around. This is a consistency card that lets you cheat on numbers and have more brutal openings in this case. So this would be a nerf that would leave the core of the deck intact, but make it less consistent, basically. So that's my personal take. But when I have to think about the history of bans, I don't think I can remember anything similar to this, which makes me not very optimistic about it happening. So this is also just my pocket pick of it will nerf as intended, and the bad cascade effect aren't as prevalent.
Yeah. I mean, I can definitely follow your arguments. I think the counter argument would be if it's enough.
Right.
Like, so again, if you ignore Modern Horizon 3, which is maybe stupid, but if you just ignore that and just look back, so before Lord of the Rings, Black was not played in Legacy. Like, it was not played in fair decks.
Yeah, I remember. It was like snuff out in some metagames were good out of Grixis Delver, mainly the Initiative era, I would guess.
Yeah. But after Initiative ban, like, if you played Black in Legacy, it was because of Dark Ritual.
Right. It was a combo color, It
was a combo color, And then they got Bowmaster and Troll in the same set, and it just became like the best fair color.
Yeah.
And maybe it's enough to ban one of them, or maybe you have to take both. Definitely, if you take both Troll and Bowmaster, it will change the deck. It would have to be. I think that will be enough.
Oh, definitely. Then we're kind of back to like we were back in the day. I don't know if you played back then, but it's like we had Blue Reanimator, and you would play like Careful Study and Hapless Researcher and stuff. Like that was like, it's viable. You can take it to your local game store, but chances are you're not going to win a GP with that deck.
Yeah, for sure. And that deck is kind of considered worse than the Black Red Reanimator, right?
Yes.
So I think the blue back is so good because it's also a tempo deck. And you can easily side into like a tempo strategy. So I think you would by banning Bowmaster or Troll or Troll, you would take away a big part of the tempo aspect, I think. So I can definitely see Troll being a good option, actually. And I guess the only point is I wonder if it's enough.
Yeah.
Maybe it is.
And that would be, I think that's one of the worst scenarios, is like we ban, but the deck is still strong. I think we've had that in the past, maybe in other formats, where it's like, ban this, we just keep going with the rest. Like, it was so good that one ban wasn't enough. And I think that would be quite bad. But in general, I want to make the ban list as short as possible, so we don't want to like ban a ton of cards just to be sure. Like, oh yeah, then we ban this for good measure. Like, I also don't like that, so it's a tough one, I think.
Yeah, I also think Wizard bans a lot more now, frequent than before. Like, during the Oko, like Oko was legal for way too long, in my
Yeah,
opinion. Like,
yeah,
because at that time they just didn't really ban. Like, okay, they did like emergency things like Tibalt trickery and the companions change.
yeah.
But then for like over a year, I don't think they like had an announcement for Legacy. Now it seems like they have it fairly. Like there was a policy change, I think. So back when Oko was legal, I think the policy was that they would just ban things when they think it's needed.
Yeah.
But there were no like schedule review. And then I felt that maybe they just didn't look at Legacy because it was too small of a format. Whereas now it seems like, is it every 3rd month, or there is like a schedule review?
Yeah,
If they ban
I'm
a
actually not sure about the schedule, but it's a bit more in system now, and you can tell by their announcement that they actually look at legacy and vintage, which is cool because
yeah.
one thing is they couldn't the organized play tournaments aren't played in those formats, so in theory they could just like give over the reins to some panel like in Pauper where they have the Pauper panel. And I think that's actually also a good decision. Like, have a handful of enfranchised players with different backgrounds. That would work as well. But but I also trust Wizards. They have access to all the stats. So
they do. Yeah, I think if it was up to me, I think the most likely outcome, and which I think I support, is that they just ban Orcish Bowmaster.
You think that's the most likely? Okay. I think the grief ban is the most likely to happen.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, if you look at what they've written, like last time, grief was the first time they mentioned it. So of course, Bowmaster they've had an eye on for like, I don't know, 9 months or something.
Yeah.
So, and also in Modern they didn't ban grief, right?
No, they kind of nerfed the deck it was in, and funnily enough, they banned Fury, which is like they hoped it would open up the formats with more small creatures, but it didn't. But that was kind of the hope. So they kind of nerfed that deck, and also the blinking or the undying part of the grief is way worse than like reanimating. There are way more like counter measure to it in Modern. Like Stern Scolding is one of the best cards because then it never enters the bet. It's a counter spell for 1 mana that counters a creature with either power or toughness 2 or less. So if you just counter the unmask effect on the stack, there's no window to blink it or to give it undying. So there's a lot of like good counterplay for it in Modern that's just built in that aren't embarrassing cards to register. So, but yeah, go ahead.
Okay, and then so then I guess what I would prefer is if they ban like a small announcement now and then review again quickly. Because there is also the argument that a lot of people do is that like if they ban Bowmaster, what will happen with Up the Beanstalk?
Right.
That be too good then?
I've seen that, which is like a reasonable argument that great. It's a great draw engine. It doesn't, because of leyline binding, you don't have to play bad cards to make it work. So Bowmasters is kind of a way to keep that from going bananas. And funnily enough,
at the same time,
go ahead.
If you look at like that deck, doesn't have a lot meta share now, and it doesn't win that much either.
Yeah,
like a 50% win rate deck. So there's no argument for banning Beanstalk now. And then you would just say, okay, we're going to ban it because it might become a problem. Which I think is the wrong. It's better to just say, okay, we ban Bowmaster, and then we look for like a month or two. If Beanstalk is everywhere, and it wins more than 55% of the
so kind of let things play out, but up the frequency of when you consider bans.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's what I would prefer.
Yeah.
But I mean, I cannot like never seen them like never. Well, with Argos Astrolabe, they kind of said it's not winning too much, but we're worried what it will do.
Right.
When we
So
make
there's actually
Delver
one
worse.
case of them looking into the crystal ball and saying, what will
Yeah.
reality looks like post this ban? We predict this, so we also do this ban. Yeah, but that's like more the exception to the rule, I would say, when it comes to.
Yeah, I think so as well. Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't be unhappy if they banned Bowmaster and Beanstalk. But I
but
don't
just
think that's what they will
imagine
do.
there are a ton of control players. Like, I'm just so worried about people's deck getting banned into oblivion. Like, I just think you want to avoid that at all costs.
Yeah.
I felt so bad about
the
the goblins banning. Like, that was just imagining somebody being like a goblins player. Like, that's they almost have it on their resume when they go and search for a new job. I'm a goblins player. Like, almost a badge. Like, that's just so terrible. I want to avoid that at all costs.
Yeah. I do think that, like, if you ban Bowmaster, there are other control decks that could become better as well, like the Narset type.
Mm-hmm.
This guy, maybe those decks can become better, and they maybe are good against the Beanstalk versions. I don't like. This is again why I wouldn't ban Beanstalk. I would just see
because we can only
happens.
guess, if that makes sense. Like,
yes.
I like that as well. I wanna see some kind of nerf to this deck and let people start from scratch. And then I want to say this, like, we're getting towards the tail end of the show here, but my last point is that in this day and age, people are so good at the game that a new best deck will arrive before you know it. No matter what gets banned here in 3 weeks' time. And then what? Is this going to be some cycle of best deck gets nerfed or banned, new best deck emerges, people complain, the deck wins more and more, new banning? Like, is this some kind of cycle? Is it utopia to believe we can get to a balanced legacy for years in a row without a banning? Is that utopia, or do you think that can happen?
I don't think that can happen. No.
You don't think? Okay.
I don't think. No, obviously they would like. You need the ban list in Legacy. Also with the printing policy, they have like with power creep. There will always be something that's just too good. And I agree that it goes faster now because of everything you said. So the meta shapes up faster.
Yeah.
But you do need bannings and unbannings to rotate these kind of eternal formats.
Right.
So, and I don't think that's a problem. I think I'm more worried that they will ban grief now and it will do nothing, like not change the number.
Yeah, that's like the worst case scenario, right? You ban grief,
yes.
People play Thoughtseize, the deck is still like too strong and heavily played.
Yes. And then what? Will people complain that Thoughtseize is like? Yeah, I see. Like, and I also really like if they ban grief now. In my opinion, that is incentivizing people to complain more.
Because it kind of works to complain?
It worked. Yeah, exactly. It worked. You know that they had an eye on Bowmaster for 9 months.
Yeah.
And then a lot of people says grief is unfun. If they do ban that instead of Bowmaster,
yeah,
then you just know that it works. So why shouldn't, like, next time a deck is too good? Why shouldn't I use the opportunity to ban Astrolabe or a card that's actually just good against my deck?
That is definitely my main concern as well. What people said was that has never happened before, so I'm kind of seeing ghosts, if that makes sense. So
yeah, but that's why I also don't think it will happen now, because it has, like, I think the banned cards at Wizard are really clever. They actually, like, the decisions they've made so far have been good.
Yeah, for sure. I agree as well.
So,
in retrospect, right at the time, I remember I didn't like Deathrite getting banned was something that was waiting to happen. I really didn't like the Astrolabe ban. Astrolabe is also still banned in Modern, which is, I don't know enough about Modern, but it's like, what's the deal about that card?
Astrolabe is the one case where they actually said that they listened to community. So
feedback. So yeah, well, there you go. I guess.
So there's the one exception where I guess if they would do it now with grief again, I wouldn't agree with the ban.
Right.
It would be the second time that they listened to community then. Yeah, it could happen, but Yeah, I don't think it's the right decision personally.
No, I mean, this has been awesome. Do you feel like there's anything
Yeah.
we're missing here that you wanna discuss, or did we get through most of the stuff we talked about and then some?
No, I think we covered everything. It
That's
was really
perfect.
fun to be on.
Yeah,
I think my final words, if you are like me, if you're a deck specialist and your deck is not that well positioned, try I really encourage you to try another deck. You will become a better Magic player by doing it. And do it in like a real way. So like, pay for coaching, do some like say, okay, I'm gonna take 3 months and I'm just gonna pick, the best deck, Delver or whatever. I'm gonna learn it. I'm gonna learn how it functions, and even if like you will have to accept that you're gonna be much worse than you used to initially, but at the end of the day, you will become a better player, and you will also learn the weakness. Like I played a lot of grief the last few months in this black-white list, and I learned that it doesn't always work. Like turn one grief doesn't always win the games.
yeah.
Every
So
game.
there's a lot to be said about taking your time, learning the nuance. Magic is very rarely this. You can just boil it down to one sentence, and that's just the truth. Like it's so subjective, has so much nuance and context. So that's why we've spent so much time, like basically talking about a few things today, is because you can't uncover it with like one sentence, or that's just.
Oh.
And you can learn a deck and master a deck like in a short amount of time. It's a study, in my opinion.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, Albert, it's been a big pleasure. Thanks so much for taking your time. I really enjoyed your perspectives and your willingness to also talk about not your proudest moments like in the past and use that as examples. That was awesome. Thanks so much, man.
Thank you so much.
All right, guys.
Bye.
Thank you so much. I had a fun time. I hope I'll be back with another cool guest before you know it. And yeah, see you next time. Bye, guys.